In a world filled with options, no choice is as crucial as selecting the right primary care doctor. Arch Health and Graybill have joined Palomar Health to create Palomar Health Medical Group, a harmonious blend of medical expertise and family values. Our promise is to create an experience of warmth and compassion, transforming fear into trust. This open enrollment, the right decision is an easy one. Choose a primary care physician that puts your and your family's health first. Choose Palomar Health Medical Group.
Mount Miguel versus El Capitan, live this Thursday on YurView.
It's another episode of Left Coast Sports here with Jon Schaeffer and Jonathan Rifkin. We are heading down the back stretch of the regular season of high school football here in San Diego County. We'll get you ready for a game time game of the week coming up on Thursday as well. But as always, we remind you that this episode is brought to you by Palomar Health. Champions aren't made overnight. They're created through practice, determination, and dedication. Palomar Health, champions of healthcare, champions for you. So there's a lot to get into. We just had a game this past weekend, La Jolla Country Day and Bishops. This week on Thursday, we have Hilltop and East Lake. Before we get to any of that, Jonathan, let's take a look at the local Max Prep rankings and what they're going to mean when we get to the postseason.
Yeah, the San Diego section has gone back to using Max Preps as its drawing board for postseason seeding. Obviously, each team is still in its own division, so that's not going to change. But for postseason implications, Max Preps is now where the section will be referring. This is going back to this year after Scorebook Live and some other metrics. So Carlsbad, Lincoln, Helix, Granite, 1 through 4. I think that's fair. All undefeated. Lincoln 7-0, the only team with 7 wins in San Diego because they started off with like a weak -1 game essentially out in Hawaii. Carlsbad hasn't been touched. I think rightfully they should be the top team in San Diego. Helix has had the toughest schedule of all of those 3 teams, but they're 6-0. Offense, a little bit of a question mark. Defense is just absolutely fantastic. They take on Grossmont this weekend, and that could be a test for Helix. Granite Hills back to their offensive prowess, representing El Cajon very well. And then you have Mission Hills at 3-2, the only 2-loss team in the top 5. And, you know, they've had a really tough schedule. One of their losses was Carlsbad. They played Carlsbad pretty well despite the 34-14 final last week. La Costa Canyon at 6, 5-1. Only losses to San Clemente, a Southern Section team, and a very good one. Cathedral Catholic, who's 2-5. They just beat Torrey Pines this past week. Not sure how much we should be weighting that, but Cathedral Catholic has had a gauntlet out-of-state schedule, which has allowed them to build up the strength of schedule to have them sitting at 7th. Del Norte, first time in program history, they're in the top 10, number 8, 5-1. They're one loss to their number 6 team in the section, La Costa Canyon. Torrey Pines at 9. They started off the season a bit rough. Their coach ended up leaving the program. There were some question marks, and they've gotten that offense rolling. And number 10, Modern Day Catholic, a team that when we saw them turned out to be 0-3 with that loss to Lincoln, but has really regained its footing a little bit. Really good strength of schedule. The number 1 strength of schedule, according to Max Preps in San Diego, is Modern Day Catholic. So they get the benefit of the doubt as the number 10 team. I think 1 through 10 is pretty fair. Torrey Pines, to me, is still the biggest question mark. I think Mission Hills should get the benefit of the doubt, even though they have those 2 losses, because those 2 losses are against really, really good teams. One team in the Southern Section, one team, the number 1 team here in San Diego, Carlsbad. So, and then you have teams that we've seen before. Ramona has creeped into the top 16. Oceanside is a top 20 team, despite losing to El Camino a couple of weeks ago. So the San Diego section is pretty well represented, and I think Max Prep so far has gotten most of these rankings right. We'll talk about where East Lake sits at number 23, being 1-5 this season, coming up when we preview our matchup.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned Modern Day as well, because a year ago they were in a similar spot where they started slow, rebounded all the way to a state championship. So, okay, let's go back to Saturday night. You were on the call Saturday, La Jolla Country Day, Bishops. This was a Bishops rout. What did you see this past weekend?
Yeah, Bishops is a very strong team. They're way bigger than La Jolla Country Day. Country Day thrives really on athleticism. Jaden Mangini, probably one of the more athletic quarterbacks you'll see, sort of a Lamar Jackson-style quarterback. Probably not without the arm, but the problem is he doesn't have downfield threats for him to show any sort of arm talent. So it is a bit of a struggle in his case. Sort of maybe a Daniel Jones type is a better comp. 13 for 25, still high efficiency, 14 yards per completion. He had an interception, and the run game was absolutely brutal. The run game is key for La Jolla Country Day to open up the passing game. They averaged 1.7 yards per carry in this game, 29 for 49. Their typically sure-handed running back Davin Doak fumbled at the 1-yard line, ended up costing a pretty big possession for the Tories and Bishops. I mean, they are just so strong. Cash Herrera, their quarterback, just a sophomore, great accuracy, also could do a bit of running. They have pieces surrounding him that really allow him to thrive. And then they also use this guy, Trayton Boykin, who has set all the records at Bishops High School for lifting. And he's an offensive lineman who they'll put as a running back when they're in the red zone. He ended up punching in 2 touchdowns, one of which he spun around, sort of showing off the dancing moves a bit. So Bishop's a bit more talented, a bit deeper, and also way bigger than La Jolla Country Day. So that really showed on Saturday night.
All right, so you had a very busy weekend because Del Norte was in action as well this past weekend. What a thriller with RB, Rancho Bernardo, a 4 overtime win. What was that like to be on the call, and what did you see as those two teams went back and forth?
Yeah, it had me worried about what was going to happen to my voice for Saturday night's game between Bishops and La Jolla Country Day. This was a special game. I mean, there were 7,000 people through the doors at Del Norte High School.
Wow.
Back-to-back times, back-to-back home games, John. They've had over 7,000 people. So 14,000 people at Del Norte in 2 games. That's the Snapdragon average for a San Diego State game this year. What they're doing at
I don't know about
Norte,
that.
what they're doing at Del Norte is incredibly impressive. And the environment is really second to none. And I feel comfortable saying that because we get to go and travel to all these fantastic high schools and get a taste of their culture. Oceanside is a great environment. Ramona is really good. I'm excited to see what we have in store tomorrow night at Eastlake. They show out pretty well, but Del Norte makes it very tough as an opponent to come in. Rancho Bernardo came in riding the heels of a loss to Torrey Pines, but they felt like they could have won that game. I talked to Eric Weddle earlier on the week, and they said, we're going to try and trick them offensively. They run a lot of misdirection offensively. They used 3 quarterbacks, and it was a whole ton of offense. I mean, they really shut down the passing game for Del Norte in the first half, but Chris Guzman in the running attack, Anthony Matara, freshman out of the backfield, really stepped up in the first 40 or so minutes, and then overtime, it was all Jack Schneider. Found 4 different receivers in overtime, 2 of which were touchdowns. Rancho Bernardo, again, struggling because they had this quarterback rotation. There wasn't a ton of consistency. Del Norte shut down the run in those overtimes, and eventually it was the Nighthawks who were able to pull out that victory in quadruple overtime, eventually en route to their first top 10 ranking in San Diego.
Yeah, we were just talking about Max Preps having now Del Norte inside that top 10 following a 4 overtime thrilling win. Speaking of a thrilling win, La Jolla over Mira Mesa, shootout 48-42, where the quarterbacks really did show out. What happened this past weekend?
Yeah, if I just showed you the Southern Utah commits line, his name is Tyson Line, no pun intended, you would have thought that Mira Mesa won this game. He had 374 passing yards on 51% completion, 4 touchdowns. He averaged 18 yards of completion, and yet he was still on the wrong side of this ball game. That's because La Jolla has a guy named Jackson Deal, who might be it's tough to say. I think for the upperclassmen, right, where as a senior, he's probably the best senior dual threat quarterback in San Diego. Obviously, Achilles Smith, different level. He's a junior, so we can get into that conversation if you'd like. But he was 10 for 15 for 200 yards, so that's 20 yards per completion for Jackson Deal. On top of that, he rushed for 133 yards and a touchdown. So you have a quarterback who's accounting for 333 yards combined. Then they had Aiden McGill, who's a prolific running back and just a junior, who rushed for 114 yards in his own right. So La Jolla was able to get out of there because they had their playmakers making plays. Defense on both sides was atrocious, I think it's fair to say. But the running game for La Jolla was far more fruitful than that from Mira Mesa. They really couldn't get Victor Gore going. Ryder Lai, their typical consistent running back, only 4.7 yards per carry. So it really wasn't much of a threat on the ground for Mira Mesa, a team that likes to have that continuity between their passing game and the rushing attack. And La Jolla just ended up with the cards falling in their favor here in this one. And Hank Henson, by the way, 3 receptions, 91 yards, 71-yard touchdown. That's pretty good to have that kind of talent surrounding a very consistent quarterback in Jackson Deal.
All right, so again, La Jolla over Mira Mesa. Let's look ahead to this week. We'll finish with Hilltop Eastlake, which we have for you coming up. Game time on YurView Thursday at 7 p.m. Let's start with Cathedral Catholic and Lincoln. This game's going to be played at Mira Mesa. Lincoln a perfect 7-0 already. What's in store for us this weekend?
Yeah, this is always the juiciest game, John. I mean, these two teams have a very deep history. They aren't huge fans of each other. And it's two of some of the best quarterbacks that you'll see in San Diego. We know Achilles Smith Jr.
Yep.
We know the prowess and the pieces around him. We know the front seven is really, really big. Jack Stevens at Cathedral Catholic is special. He's averaging 16 yards per completion, 77 completions for 1,255 yards and 11 touchdowns this season for Stevens. So he's really good. Their offensive line is probably the best in the county in Cathedral Catholic. The defense has been the biggest question mark. And when they go and they play the best teams outside of San Diego, Nevada, and Arizona, and Utah, it's a good litmus test for this team. It also shows that San Diego itself, the region, has a little bit of ground to make up, to catch up to the top of some of the other areas like the southern section, or Bishop Gorman and Liberty out in Vegas, or Canyon Creek out in Utah, or some of the schools in Gilbert, Arizona, and Phoenix area. But the section itself has been making huge strides. And Cathedral Catholic has always been, probably outside of Oceanside, the top team in San Diego. This year, there's a lot more continuity, but it's a team that has won now both of their last two games. They started off the season 0-3. They're 2-3 now. My guess is that this is going to be a lot closer than what people are expecting, because Cathedral Catholic can match up physically with Lincoln. Lincoln, again, a really, really tough team to play. Probably have more athletes surrounding Achilles Smith Jr. offensively, but Cathedral Catholic is really big, well-coached, and they mix it up on offense. If they can find a way to hunker down defensively and start to evolve from what we've seen in the opening couple of games, this is going to be a gauntlet of a matchup at Mira Mesa High School.
It'll just be interesting to see if Lincoln gets tested in a game. Off to the 7-0 start, we'll see if they are given a game into the second half by Cathedral Catholic. There's also El Camino and La Costa Canyon coming up this weekend. What are your expectations for that one?
Yeah, El Camino coming off a surprise loss, in my opinion, to Torrey Pines. Torrey Pines' defense last week really hunkered down. El Camino coming off that blowout prior to Oceanside. That was a battle for the Oceanside area, El Camino and Oceanside High School. They won that one 49-8. El Camino had not given up double-digit points since their season opener against Mission Viejo on the road against a top 5 team, maybe a top 10 team, depending on who you're talking to and what you're looking at in the southern section. So one of the best teams in the country for all intents and purposes, Mission Viejo, hosting El Camino. El Camino gave up 38 in that game. Since then, they hadn't given up more than 8 points before Torrey Pines was able to figure it out a little bit last week. And it was really the defense for the Torrey Pines Falcons that gave El Camino fit. So I'm looking for a bounce back game here. And Coach Sovacool has this La Costa Canyon team rolling. La Costa Canyon is one of those teams that consistently gets into the open division or consistently gets into Division I postseason. And then they struggle. They're really good in the regular season. They're consistently a top 10 school, but no championships in the, 18 seasons, 17 seasons that Coach Sovacool has been there, with a ton of opportunity to do it. So they have a chip on their shoulder. They have a young team offensively, but they figured it out a little bit. Again, both the teams' only loss come from outside of San Diego. And that speaks volumes, because one of these teams is going to have to lose this ball game, and that motif is going to change. Is it going to be El Camino? Is it going to be La Costa? I don't know, but it's going to be a close and really fun game.
All right, so a reminder, you can watch each and every Game Time high school football game of the week on YurView Channel 4. That includes Thursday night at 7 p.m. We'll be back in Chula, Hilltop, and Eastlake. That's coming up again this Thursday at 7 p.m. What do you hope to see on YurView?
Yeah, I'm hoping to see a close game. I think we will. Eastlake is a top 25 team according to Max Preps, number 23, but the record's 1-5. And the question begs, why are they 1-5? Well, they played Temescal Canyon, a really good southern section team. Chula Vista, which has had its best. I think I brought them up almost every Left Coast pod that we've done so far, John. Chula Vista, which in Howard Bannister's very long and very successful career is the best team that they've ever fielded. Bonita Vista is a bad loss. San Ysidro, easy win. Castle Park, easy win. And then Eastlake, or excuse me, this is Hilltop. I'm talking about Hilltop, not Eastlake. Hilltop is 3-3. Those are their wins. I'll get back to that in a second. Eastlake has played a much more difficult schedule, which is why they only have 1 win. Now, ironically enough, their 1 win has come against a team from Indiana. They traveled to Chicago, back on September 22nd. So they're coming off of that bye week. They play Hammond Central High School and they win 27-21. Great win. Prior to that, losses to Villa Park, top 30 team in the Southern section. Granite Hills, the number 3 team in San Diego. Del Norte, the number 8 team in San Diego. Capistrano Valley, a top 25 team. So this is a team in Eastlake that has played a top 30 team in their respective sections, whether it be the San Diego section, 2 top 10 teams in that, or the Southern section, 2 top 30 teams in that. So they're really a tested team. And for what they're going through offensively, it's fascinating that they've been able to hang on in some of these games because they still haven't figured out their quarterback situation, Don. They switch off between Sawyer Bray and Tyler Balco. Balco got his most consistent playing time last week in the win. I'm going to assume that this is where they're going to go with Tyler Balco. Again, didn't really take more than 11 snaps prior to last week. He goes 10 for 15, 3 touchdown passes, 252 passing yards, really, really good poised arm inside the pocket. The Eastlake defense is a huge question mark. Hilltop, again, hasn't been tested. Their 3 wins are against some of the teams that are trying to rebuild in San Diego. And I'm not so sure what we're going to see from them, this being their first test in the city of San Diego. Really their biggest test after losing to Chula Vista and Bonita Vista. So I think it has a chance of being a good game, a close game. But I also think that Eastlake, riding off of their win last week and maybe figuring out their quarterback situation with Balco's performance last week, might make things a bit difficult for the Lancers in this one.
So again, Hilltop and Eastlake, this will be Thursday at 7 on YurView, our 5th game of our high school football schedule. That also includes El Cap and Mount Miguel next week. That'll be Thursday, October 12th. We have games for you coming up the following weekend, a pair of games, Mission Hills and El Camino, Madison, St. Augustine, and then we'll wrap up our season on Thursday, October 26th. Jonathan, great stuff. Great insight. Looking forward to tomorrow night to be with you again on the call. We'll be at Eastlake. Join us on YurView beginning tomorrow at 7 p.m. Jonathan, appreciate it as always, my friend.
A lot of fun, John. Let's do it again sometime.
We absolutely will. And again, a reminder, this episode brought to you by Palomar Health. Champions aren't made overnight. They're created through practice, determination, and dedication. Palomar Health, champions of healthcare, champions for you. Join us Thursday night at 7 p.m. We'll have high school football for you once again on YurView. For Jonathan Rifkin, my name is Jon Schaeffer, and you've been watching Left Coast Sports, presented by Palomar Health.